I am here with Pamela Thompson, and this is just such a beautiful treat for us. Inside of the Be Extraordinary Women's Network, I am always spotlighting and celebrating extraordinary women making extraordinary moves across the globe. And honestly, when I met Pamela, I knew she was extraordinary. I had no idea all the things that she has done and all the places she has been and all of the people that she's touched and affected. And this is really what I want to share today. I want to share these extraordinary moves. Why? Because I believe when one woman tells her story, she actually brings hope and possibilities to everybody else that's listening. So, Pamela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Debbie, for the gracious introduction. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, we jumped on a call and I think we were well over an hour just sharing from our hearts of what we've done and, you know, what we're passionate about. And I would love for you to just give our audience a taste of that. Who is Pamela Thompson anyway?
Well, I'm a many-faceted creature, as we all are. I'm somebody who knew from a very young age, Debbie, probably about age 4, I knew in my bones that I would travel in the world and be of service, but I didn't know what that would look like or how I would do it. I remember going to bed at night when I was about 9 and dreaming of the countries that I would visit. And because I really didn't know about journalism or anything like that, it was like being a missionary, although I didn't come from a really religious family. But anyway, that was kind of the only thing that I knew about back then. And I'm also someone who believes that life is an adventure to be lived to the fullest. And I really feel that I've lived my life according to that mantra.
Oh my goodness. I know you have because I've heard some of those stories. So I'm going to apologize right away. If things break up in sound, we're going to give Pamela the mic a lot more than me because it's on my end. Something on my end is wonky today. And we got fingers crossed and we're working with the tech gods so that they're with us, not against us. But I would love to hear a little bit more about that journey of those dreams coming true. But first, where are you coming in from? Because I found this fascinating that I met through a connection in Mexico, but you don't live in Mexico.
No, I've spent a fair bit of time in Mexico, Debbie. I live in Victoria, BC, Canada. That's where I live.
Beautiful, and I also
Victoria,
think that's
BC,
also
Canada.
a lot of fun because, as everybody knows, I also live in Canada. And 90% of the time, or even 95, 99% of the time, I'm speaking to women globally, all over the world. So when I get a rare treat to speak to a fellow Canadian woman that's really doing the work, doing the stuff, I'm just sitting here in even a deeper sense of gratitude. So now let's talk about that journey from that dream and what's unfolded since then.
Well, a bunch of things. I was working for the federal government in Canada at Health Canada in the early 90s, and I went to a workshop on project management in a government environment. And we broke into small groups, and I ended up facilitating the small groups because that's kind of what I did. And at the end of it, then we presented our group work. And the facilitator trainer came up to me and said, "Where did you learn to do that?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Facilitate." And I said, I never was taught to do it. I just do it. But I've been trained in therapeutic groups, and I've done group and family therapy. And he said, "We have to talk." Within 6 months of that conversation, on a handshake, I left my federal government position with all the benefits and all the things and went to join this consulting group, this management consulting group, only on a handshake, no contract, and a verbal understanding that I would get, say, 8 days a month at a really good per diem of work from them. And then what happened? And then what happened is 3 months in, the number of days a month started to go down. And at 6 months, the guy who brought me in had a philosophical split with the other two, the VP and the president. And he ended up leaving and forming his own company and asked me to join him. And I didn't want to take sides. So then I just let go and I started my own consulting business. And I did really well. I ran that company for 10 and a half years. It was the first of 4 consulting and coaching companies that I've run since the early 90s.
Wow. So already I can see and hear so many extraordinary moves. Number one, really trusting your own intuition. Really, is that something that you have also honed in and understand as a gift you have?
Yes, Debbie. And in fact, my first book is called Learning to Dance with Life, a guide for high achieving women. And one of the 7 keys in that book is listen to and trust in your body's wisdom. Because I know that when I do that, it always works out for the best. But when I did the pros and cons list, I would stay up maybe 3 nights wondering if I'd made the right decision. When I listen to and trust in my body's wisdom, it's always the right thing. I can let go and relax and say it's all going to work out the way it's meant to be.
Okay, I can relate so much to this because when I'm in my head logically trying to figure it out, like you say, weighing the pros and cons, I can really get confused. I can be, it's like I'm fighting my own wisdom, my own body. And so the other thing that you just touched on quickly is my first book. So obviously you're an author. One book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, I lost a little bit of your end of your sentence there, but I think you asked me about the other 2 books. Is that correct? Okay, the second book is called The Exploits of Minerva, Reflections of a 60-something Woman. And that book is about 6 women who've been part of a women's circle for over 20 years, supporting each other through a variety of life transitions. Finding the love of your life, losing the love of your life, burnout, separation, divorce, all the things, right? And it's told through the voice of Minerva, who is partly autobiographical, and she's partly a muse who came to me over 30 years ago when I was riding on a bike trail in Ottawa, where I used to live. And I pushed her down and then didn't write about her because I was too busy. And she came back, I guess it was 2021, and said, okay, you have to write about me now. But I ended up interviewing friends and friends of friends about their various life transitions and also incorporating my own. But what I did is I created composite characters. So for 3 people that I interviewed, I'd create 1 character. Like it'd be 3 people who lost their love of their life due to cancer or whatever after being with them for like 40 some years, and what that experience was like. And I combined their experiences. So the intention was to make people feel like they're not alone in the world, because as women, we go through many transitions, and to understand if you're doing these different things, that you're not crazy or you're not alone. So that was the intention of the book. And so that was really fun to write too, because it's creative nonfiction. So a lot of it's real, but part of it is like, it's set in Vancouver. I used to live in Vancouver, but I don't anymore. It's set in a women's circle. I'm in a women's circle, but I haven't been in it for 20 years. It was like 4 years when I wrote the book. So anyway, kind of fun. And I was able to integrate my Art of Change framework into that, because our women's circle does experiential exercises almost every time we meet. So I added that, my Art of Change framework, to that book as well in one of the chapters. Do you want to hear about the most recent book, Debbie? Okay, the most recent one is called Truths and Contradictions, Life-Changing Experiences in Afghanistan. Now, one of the things that I did is I used to be a global health and management consultant. So I've been a coach, I've been many things, but for a number of years, I traveled the world and I did consulting. And I ended up being invited to throw my hat into the ring for one of 3 positions in Afghanistan. And this was August 2010. Do you want me to share the story about how that happened a little bit? Or do we have time for me to do that?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So what happened is I just come back I'll wait on that one. So I was in Afghanistan for 13 months from October 2010 to October 2011. And yeah, it was a time, I'll tell a little story actually. What happened is I had launched a coaching business about 18 months before that. So we're August 2010. And I had a network of coaches in Canada and the States, and we were coaching people through a variety of life transitions. And 18 months in, I started to feel really restless. And it wasn't filling me up. It was largely one-on-one coaching, and I was really missing the group work. I was missing the international work. And I decided I was in the process of trying to get out of my head and into my body more. So I added to my life and business coaching training, I started to take body-centered coaching. And it was the last class of this program via teleseminar. And the facilitator coach was asking for a volunteer to demo a process, a body-centered decision-making process. And no one was putting their hand up. So I put my hand up. So I said, okay, I'll do it. She said, find a line on the floor and think about something that you really, really want. Now notice if any negative feelings, beliefs, emotions come up for you, and imagine each one of those as a rock in a knapsack on your back. Now feel how heavy they are. Now release them and let them go and cross that line however you wish. You can walk across it, you can run across it, you can leap across it, and say aloud what you want. So I leapt across the line, Debbie, and I said, I want to play big. Within a week, I'm going to say, I received an email asking me to throw my hat into the ring for one of 3 positions in Afghanistan. And one of them had my name written all over it. Senior Technical Advisor, Strategic Planning and Performance Measurement. That's just one of the things I did back then. And anyway, so within a week, got the email, talked to my husband about it. He was totally in support of this 9-month contract initially for me to live and work in Kabul. Anyway, then I threw my hat into the ring. Within 2 weeks of that, I was part of the interview process. A month after that, I was on the ground in Afghanistan, having signed this 9-month contract that ended up getting extended to 13 months. So this is my most recent book. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So my most recent book, Truths and Contradictions, Life-Changing Experiences in Afghanistan. The first part of the book is scary and funny stories about what it was like to live and work in a war zone. And the second half is based on in-depth interviews I did with Afghan colleagues and their friends in 2024 about what it was like to grow up in Afghanistan and live there during key historic events like the Russian invasion and the 2 Taliban takeovers. And I had to change everybody's names up to protect their anonymity. So I wrote through Minerva again in this one because I figured I'm changing everybody else's name up. I'll change mine up too. So anyway, it was fun to write, and I also wanted to end on a note that really links with my overall mission in the world. And so I talked about at the end, how can we internationally support the education of women and girls in Afghanistan? How can each and every one of us do that? And then how can we help build peace and understanding in the world? So end the book with a vision of a world where, irrespective of our religions, our cultures, our ethnicities, we all stand together, men and women as equals and partners, and create this world that works for everyone. And
Okay, well,
yes.
Can you hear me? Am I breaking up?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I love this so much, and we need to have a bigger conversation. I know that right now because we've barely touched on all the things that you've done in this world. But I do have a question right now for you to answer, specifically speaking to the hearts inside of the Be Extraordinary Women's Network. What advice do you have them? Now, some of them are volunteers. Some of them are somebody that have been through something and they're trying to figure out, is this an empowering story or a disempowering story? Do I share my story or do I keep it to myself? They may or may not see themselves as a leader, or they might be in transition as somebody that was a CEO that now is stepping back and just being her. What advice do you have for these women?
I'm having trouble hearing you now. You're breaking up now, Debbie, but I think I got it. I think you want me to share from my heart what I believe could be advice.
Yeah.
Okay, for your network. First of all, I believe that each and every one of us is a leader. We don't have to be a CEO of our own business or someone else's company. It's just where we can be a leader in our families, our communities, whatever that looks like for us. So you are a leader. And one of the things that I've mentioned before is this key in my first book, listen to and trust in your body's wisdom. It's very important to develop those skills. And how I would suggest you do that, because a lot of times initially you think, is that just my head talking, or is this really my heart, right? And so do things like body scanning. Before you get out of bed in the morning, scan your body from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, and just really feel in and notice if you feel any tightness or pain or resistance, and breathe into that and let it go. Set the intention to release and let it go. The other thing to do is mindfulness walking meditations, where instead of going out for a walk and thinking about the argument you had with your partner in the morning or with your kids, you instead focus on your senses. You feel the wind on your cheek, you smell the salt sea air if you're close to the ocean, you hear the crunch of the leaves underfoot. You focus on all your senses, and whenever thoughts come into your head, you imagine putting them in a bubble and having them float away, because they will. And the more you do these things to really get out of your head and into your body, the more you will begin to listen to and trust in your body's wisdom. So when we're at a crossroads, and I support one of my big things I do is supporting mission-driven women at pivotal crossroads, whether they be life or leadership, to navigate change and leads through uncertainty without burning out. And the more we practice these things, then we will know whether we ask ourselves, am I ready to take this leap? And rather than forcing yourself if you don't feel ready, feel like you're ready. Sometimes you do have to take the leap and know that the net is always there for you. But if it really feels too scary, then ask for support for people in your community. It sounds like, Debbie, you have this amazing community. Ask for support. Get mentorship in your Shine community, and find a group of women that will support you to move forward and provide you with advice based on where they have been and where you're thinking of going.
Wow. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope that I am not breaking up when I say this to you. What a treasure you are. Extraordinary stories, extraordinary moves, and extraordinary connection. And I would love to have you back for a full 40-minute interview. If that lights you up, I know already just by the comments that I'm seeing.
I would love that, Debbie. And I really appreciated the opportunity to speak with your network today, and I look forward to it. You're a great interviewer. You make everyone feel very relaxed. So yes, I would be excited for that opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll end.
Thank you.